No, don't make me talk to a bunch of little empty boxes. I'd like to see your faces. Um, so the story starts. On my 35th birthday. On January 31st, 2008, I turned 35 years old. And I woke up that morning in a cold sweat. I had a panic attack. And I didn't know why. I couldn't figure it out because everything had been pretty good at that point. You know, I was married, I had 2 kids, I had a house, I had 2 cars. Those are my kids in 2008. They are now teenage girls running all around Barcelona, which is terrifying at the moment. But nevertheless, everything was good. And I had a good run. You know, getting to that point, everything was going well. I started off my, a long time ago as a broke musician. I didn't make any money. I played in bands, but I had a lot of fun. And when I got tired of not having any money, the internet came along. The internet saved me. And I was lucky enough to get a job. I got a job during the Web 1.0, the 1.0 days at a company called IXL, which was one of the big web consulting companies back then. And I was doing graphic design and HTML because back then, if you could spell HTML, you can get a job. And I could do a little bit more than spell it, which was good. And you know, it was interesting. I found myself doing front-end development, markup, and graphic design. And what I found myself back then, the year is 1999, I found myself at the end of the waterfall process. And I didn't like being at the end of the waterfall process. I wanted to move upstream. I wanted to have more say. And so a friend of mine gave me this book, and he said, read this book. It might be interesting to you. And this is a book called Information Architecture for the World Wide Web. It is now in its 4th edition, but I really liked what this book had to say, and I decided to become an information architect to move up the waterfall. And so I set down this career to do information architecture and UX design and interaction design, and I've got this whole new path to move forward, and the dot-com bubble bursts. And all of a sudden, I'm bouncing around trying to find work. I ended up at a few different places. I worked at America Online for a few years, working on designing the software that went on these CDs. I moved to the West Coast of the United States to lead a small design team at Web Trends. And then I finally found my way back right around 2008 to a company in New York City called The Ladders, where I became the director of user experience. And this is where I found myself on the morning of my 35th birthday. I had clawed my way up to the middle, but I had a good salary, I had a good job, I had a team, I was a middle manager, and I wake up in this cold sweat, and I'm terrified and I'm scared, and I realize why I'm scared. And the realization was this, is that there were hordes, if you will, of younger, better, faster, and hungrier designers coming into the web design world. And they were better than me, they were faster than me, and most importantly, they were cheaper than me. And if I had to continue to compete with them to get the next design job and the next design job, I was going to lose. And I was afraid that in 5 years, when I turned 40, now, remember, I was 35 at the time. In 5 years, when I turned 40, I would be old, expensive, and unemployable. And so I made a very big decision that particular morning. I decided that I was no longer going to look for jobs, and that jobs were going to look for me. So instead of every time there's a layoff, every time there's a crisis, every time there's an acquisition or a reorganization, having to rewrite my CV, put it out there, apply for jobs, interview for jobs, something that inevitably I felt like I was going to lose, I was going to create a situation where jobs were going to find me. Now, I recognize that those are big words, wow, and they're really kind of mind-blowing words. I get that, right? But they bring up some very, very good questions right away. And these are the first questions that I asked myself as soon as I made that decision. First question, does anyone know who I am? If jobs were going to find me in 2008, Does anybody know me? Right? They'd have to come looking for me somehow. Who am I? Why would they look for me? Right? Why would jobs look for me? What problem do I help people solve? Why would people look for me in the first place? How would they find me? Would I be on Google, my own website, on LinkedIn? Where would I be? And then ultimately, if I'm successful and I get jobs to find me, what kind of work do I want? What kind of jobs do I want to find me? And so what I did was I spent the next 10 years, it's almost 12 and a half years now, building my platform, answering these questions, working to figure out how to create a platform around myself that will attract jobs to me. And over those 12 and a half years, I discovered that there were at least 5 qualities that I found in myself that were necessary to becoming forever employable, to create a situation where you have a platform and opportunities come to you. And in addition to that, there were 5 specific steps that I took to becoming forever employable. And when you add it all up, it comes down to this. And this was a really interesting thing for me, a big realization, is that you have to treat your career and your professional development as a product. In the same way we think about the products and services we build today, we have to think about ourselves and our growth and our career in the same way. And so what were those 5 qualities? Well, the 5 qualities to becoming forever employable were these: entrepreneurialism, self-confidence, continuous learning, improvement, and reinvention. And if this sounds familiar to you, especially to this group, it should, because these are a lot of the same principles that we find in highly successful, mature, agile teams. This is the recipe for agility. But instead of applying these qualities to a product or a service or a team, we apply these qualities to the way that we improve our career and our professional growth. Now, look, you might say to yourself, well, okay, what does this mean? Or how do I find these qualities in myself? Because I was looking for these qualities in myself, and I didn't think that I had them all. For example, entrepreneurialism. I've never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I've never been the ideas guy. I've always been the execution person. If you need it done, I'll get it done, but I never had the ideas. But I looked into my past. I tried to figure out what I've done that was entrepreneurial that could help me start to build this platform. I used to play music in bands that traveled around the United States. Every band I was in is a startup. You get a few friends together, you have a crazy set of ideas, you pour everything you have into that idea, and you hope that you can convince others to follow you so you can build it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I had done this for years. I had been an entrepreneur, just not in the classic sense. And so I could learn a ton from that and use that to build my platform. That helped me build my self-confidence, but I was also looking for other ways, other things that I've done. If I'm going to step out there, put myself out there, how do I know that I can confidently do that, right? What have I done in my past to help me build my self-confidence? One of the things that I've done in my past that helps me build my self-confidence was that I spent 6 months in the circus. I traveled around the United States for 6 months with a circus immediately after university. Now, I'll tell you right now, it was a miserable experience. I didn't like it, but I learned a ton. I learned how to get along with a very diverse group of individuals. I learned how to survive in a very weird place. I learned so many tricks. It was this amazing 6 months of discovery that really helped me believe in myself and the fact that I can really do anything, right? Put myself in any situation and I'll get through it. Continuous learning is a key aspect of becoming forever employable. Everything that you read, when you speak with others, when you engage in the community, all of that builds learning. It helps you think about new ways to be better at your job, new ways to be successful, new ideas. And so you've got to build this continuous learning. And I do that by reading and engaging. And when I do that, it helps me improve what I do. One of the things that I try to do is consistently and continuously improve what I do for a living. Much of what I do for a living is teaching and training. One of the ways that I continuously improve is I teach with other people. Alex and Guillaume and I have taught together. I learned a ton by teaching with them. I teach a lot with Jeff Patton. This photo is from the last time I taught a class in person before quarantine in Paris. I teach with Jeff because I learn a ton from Jeff. We teach the same material. We come from different angles, and I get better by working with great colleagues like Jeff, like Alex, like Guillaume, so forth. And the last quality is reinvention, right? The world is changing around us. The way that we deliver things, the specific terms and language that we use may not always make sense. The ideas may always make sense, but then how do we start to reinvent our ideas to meet new demand and the new realities around us? One of the things that I'm doing is I'm taking a lot of the product thinking work, that I've done, and applying it to places where it has not been applied yet, like human resources, finance, marketing, legal, right? How do you bring product thinking to non-product teams? This is one of the ways that I'm continuously reinventing myself. And every time you do this, you start to attract new opportunities to yourself. So those are the 5 qualities that I've discovered in myself to becoming forever employable. Now, the 5 steps that I took to get there are these 5 steps, okay? Planting a flag, tell your story, follow the new path, teach, and give it all away. Let me show you what I mean by each one of these. Okay, first step, plant a flag. The first thing you have to do to become forever employable is to decide where you're going to be a recognized expert. What will people come to you to look for, right? Where will you plant that flag to build that platform? The people who have done this well have become synonymous with the flag that they've planted. Let me show you some examples. Eric Ries, right? Eric Ries planted his flag on the lean startup. Everybody knows Eric Ries is the lean startup guy, right? Jake Knapp planted his flag on design sprints, right? Jake wrote the book on design sprints. That's where he planted his flag. He's built his platform around that. My friend Alex Osterwalder over in Switzerland planted his flag on business model generation. Everybody knows Alex for business model canvas, business model generation. That's the part that he owns, right? You've got to decide where to plant your flag. For me, I planted my flag at the intersection of user experience design and Agile because that's something that I was struggling with. That's a problem that I was solving for myself. And it turns out lots of other people were struggling with that same problem. And so I decided to plant my flag and my expertise there because I was working on that stuff, right? And today, this was the birth of Lean UX, and I'm the guy. I'm the Lean UX guy, for better or for worse. I'm the Lean UX guy. And so you might ask yourself, well, how do I figure out where to plant my flag, right? What do I do to do that? And there's at least one way that I suggest is to look at the intersection of these 3 elements. So first of all, what are your passions and your expertise? What are you good at? What do you do at work? What do you know a lot about? What is the problem that you help people solve, right? And I would not limit this to professional expertise only. I would also add in the personal passions that you have. For example, when I decided to plant my flag, one of the things that I was looking at was so you saw that I played in bands, you saw that I play piano. I have a large amount of knowledge about vintage electric pianos. I know a lot about them. I used to have a collection of them when I lived in the United States. I thought about planting my flag about vintage electric pianos. But I was also starting to consider a couple other things, right? Target audience, right? Who is my target audience and how big is that target audience? And then also trends, global trends, technological trends, consumer consumption trends, customer behavior trends, geopolitical trends, right? Where's the world headed? And the intersection of those 3 things will give you a few options, a few different flags that you might want to plant. what you then can do, and this is a lot of that where that sort of lean startup and design thinking comes into play, is to start thinking about these flag options. And before you invest all your time and your money and your effort in a particular direction, really start to think through, well, which one will yield the best results? And you can test those flags, right? For each flag, each option, you can say, look, what's the biggest risk here? Well, the biggest risk for vintage electric pianos is that the audience is too small. Well, I can test that, right? I can go on forums and see how many people participate in these conversations. I can post some pictures of my pianos and see how many people react and see if I can generate some interest, right? But the idea is to reduce the risk of planting a flag where you're going to struggle to build an audience and attract those opportunities to you. So that's step number one, planting your flag. Step number two, telling your story, right? The idea is that once you've planted your flag, you tell your story to anyone, everywhere, all the time. The goal is just to continuously tell the story. And the first thing that happens is we start to doubt ourselves, right? We get into our own heads and we let doubt take over. What unique story do I have? Everyone has good experience, right? She has more to offer than I do. My story isn't extraordinary enough to be unique. But here's the thing. The best part of your experience and of your story is not whether you've run an ultra marathon or built a massive company or worked with celebrities. The best part of your experience is that nobody else has it. You can tell a story that nobody else can. You are the only person to have gone through everything you have in the ways and at the times that you have. And so that means that you're the only person with that perspective. And so it might feel like everything's been already said on the internet, but your story hasn't been told. You've got that opportunity. Now look, I started telling my story in August of 2010 at the big Agile conference. I started talking about Agile and UX. This is 2.5 years after my 35th birthday. So this stuff takes time, right? It takes time to get from idea to starting to give talks. But 2.5 years after my 35th birthday, I gave the first talk about Agile and UX. A month later, I gave the first Lean UX talk. That was in Paris in September of 2010. Still 2.5 years. And what's interesting is that 3 years after my 35th birthday, I got my first really big break. On March 7th, 2011, I published this article, Lean UX, Getting Out of the Deliverables Business. This was published on Smashing Magazine. Smashing Magazine in 2011 had 1 million readers in their audience. Today, it's much more. And so this took the conversation global and gave me opportunities to tell my story in lots of other new places. Now I'm on stage telling the story everywhere. Anywhere that anyone would listen, I was talking about Lean UX, right? Whether it was Twitter or Medium or LinkedIn or Quora. I was writing on Facebook at the time. I started writing my newsletter at the time. Anywhere, anytime somebody would listen, I would tell my story. And I got better at telling my story. Honestly, the only thing we stopped short of doing was Lean UX, the musical. We thought about it. Decided this was going to be a step too far. We didn't do Lean UX, the musical. Maybe we should have. I don't know. There's still time. There's still time. And so you think about it, right? So I start telling the story. Why did the story resonate? Right? Why is it, why do people pay attention to this? And as I think about it, I think these are the reasons why. First of all, I solved a real problem many people had, right? So I was working on this Lean UX, this Agile and UX thing, and lots of teams were struggling with it back then. They still are today. I had actual real world experience. I was doing the work. And so I could talk about the work that we were doing. And when I did talk about it, I was humble. I didn't just talk about all the wins that we had. I talked about the losses as well. We tried this and it was terrible. And this is what we learned from it. And this is what we did differently. And so I shared that. And every time I presented something, I provided practical, tactical advice. And you'll notice that in this presentation as well. And all of that helps to build an authentic connection with your audience. And as you build that authentic connection, the audience grows. They pay attention to you because they're invested in your story and you get better at telling your story. So we planted our flag and we tell our story. Now, what's interesting is that as you start to tell your story, new opportunities start to show up, new paths emerge, and you need to be ready to take those paths, because as you amplify your message, those new paths will start to come your way. Now, for me, right, I'm doing less and less design work, which is a problem for me, remember, because I was already competing with designers who were better than me. But instead of doing design work, I'm flying around the world giving talks and teaching workshops and speaking at conferences and not doing design work and getting very worried about it. Well, it turns out a new path emerged. Book publishers go to conferences. They look for people who are speaking on the latest topics, and they offer book deals. I got offered a book deal to write the Lean UX book. This was a new opportunity for me, and I said, yeah, why not? I signed up to write the book, but there was one big secret. And the secret was I didn't know how to write a book, which I didn't tell the publisher. 500 words I could write, 750 words I could write, 50,000 words, I can't write it, right? And I didn't know how to do it. But I decided that I was going to seize the moment. Now, a lot of people say, well, Jeff, you were so lucky. You're so lucky for getting that opportunity. Yeah, you're right. I was lucky, but I was prepared to follow that new path. I was prepared to take on that opportunity. And I did. I went down this path to write a book, and it was brutal. Brutal. I spent 2 years writing the Lean UX book. I burned through 3 editors, and I wrote the manuscript 4 times because it was terrible the first 3 times. It took me 2 years to finish this. I wrote the book 4 times. With Josh Seiden, I was able to finish it. And then finally, 5 years after my 35th birthday, I'm now 40 years old, 5 years, I published my first book. So to be clear, this was 5 years of hard work, of doing the work and sharing the work and telling the story to get to a book deal, to publish the book, to finally get something out of, to get a book published. 5 years to get there. Plant your flag, tell your story, follow the new path. Step number 4 is to teach. Now, it's funny, I find myself in a position today where everything I do is teaching. What I'm doing right now is teaching, and I say yes to pretty much everything. I do workshops and conferences, webinars and podcasts, guest articles and interviews, because when I teach, I get feedback on my material. I learn how to improve my storytelling. I understand where the content makes sense and where there's opportunity to update the content. And I get better at the work itself because I'm teaching it at the same time, right? And you could do this as a freelancer or as an autonomo or self-employed, but you can also do this in-house. If you work in-house, there are lots of opportunities for you to teach in-house. These are just a few of them, but take all of those opportunities and practice being a teacher, because the better you get at this, the better you get at telling your story, the bigger the platform, the bigger the recognized expertise, the more opportunities come to you. Now, the last step in the process is the one I learned last. I learned it, it took me a long time to really believe this, but step 5 is giving it all away. And it doesn't make sense. You've been working hard for 10 years, 20 years. You've built up experience and expertise. And now you're supposed to just give it away and not get paid for it? And the answer is yes. The more you give away, the more you give back to the community, to the industry, to the domain, the more opportunities come back to you. The more you present yourself as a thought leader, you present yourself as a recognized expert, and the more opportunities come to you. To do that, you've got to make your work and yourself easily findable and accessible. You have to post your materials online where people can find them, your articles and your webinars, your podcasts, and your blog posts, whatever's easiest for people to find. For me, it's my website. You go to my website, everything is there. Articles and tools and canvases and videos and podcasts. It's all there. Everything's free except my events. Right? If you need it, it's there. It's super easy to find. everything you need is there, right? Make yourself easily findable and accessible. When you give stuff away, you build your community locally, and you start to give back, and you build up goodwill. And this is great, because you don't have to just give up your, give out your content, but you give your time, right? So you show up at meetups, you give talks, you help organize local conferences, you help out a local business. If you've got a friend in a local company and you want to practice some ideas that you have, offer to give a free talk at lunch one day, right? Tell your story, practice telling your story, build goodwill, build community. Now, to wrap this up, a few things to remember. Staying relevant means staying active. This is work, and it's continuous work. I've been doing this for 12 and a half years. You have to stay active in conversations. You have to have a presence in the community. You have to do the work, and you have to contribute to the work. Participate in events and meetups and conferences. You've got to be a part of the conversation, because if you're not, eventually you will fall behind. As you're thinking about inventing yourself from one thing to the next, start the next thing at least 2 years before you need it. I showed you earlier that I'm trying to move into human resources, bring agility and product thinking and design thinking to human resources. I have no credentials in human resources. I started having that conversation a year and a half ago. And today I'm starting to see some of that traction. I'm starting to get invitations to speak at HR panels about agility in HR. And that's starting to show some progress. It took 18 months to get here. What I shared with you today is one path. It's my path. There are many other options. This worked for me. Use as much or as little of it as you need as makes sense for you, but I hope you draw some inspiration from it. And to wrap this up, I like to close with this Bezos quote, because Bezos always gets asked, what's going to change in the next 5 years? And he says that's not how he thinks about his business. He thinks about his business by thinking about what will not change in the next 10 to 20 years. And let's focus on those things. What will people always need? What will always be there? How we deliver it inevitably is going to change. But if we can focus on the core needs that people will always have, right? Autonomy, purpose, collaboration, psychological safety, right? Contribution, all of those things, right? How do we deliver services on top of that is key. But we're always selling to the things that won't change in the next 10 to 20 years. So I hope you can take that as a bit of inspiration as you think about how to build your own platform, how to think about becoming a recognized expert, and how to become forever employable. I'd love to open up for questions now. I will say this, and I'll stop sharing my screen here in just a second. The book is out. It came out 1 week ago. So you can go to Amazon and get it. If you want more details, foreveremployable.com. And if you want the slides that I showed you today, you can go to jeffgothelf.com/slides, and I'll send you the slides. So with that, I'd love to take your questions about this or really anything else that you'd like to talk about. Alex. Alex, do we have questions? Do you have questions? Alex, you're muted.
Okay, so, okay, BBC time. Artur, please, por favor. Anyone, questions? I found this, I have to say more than a question, that I read the book. I found the content quite consistent with the Lean UX, the Canvas, the approaches that Jeff is using to shape the way products should be developed or discovered. So that's quite consistent. And the way he's describing himself, how are you acting, it's quite consistent from what I know. So I would like to say that I have highlighted some parts of the book because I read it quick. I need to go through them. But I would like to say that it's very true what we find in the book. Highly consistent with your previous work, and I think it describes your behavior.
Look, it's funny, but that's exactly right. And if you think about, look, like for example, Lean UX, the book. Lean UX, the book, is continuous improvement and an iteration on an idea. The idea starts off as some tweets. The tweets get some traction. The tweets turn into a short blog post. The short blog post maybe gets turned into a conference talk. The conference talk gets turned into a book proposal, and the book proposal turns into a book or a workshop and so forth, right? These are all iterations. These are things that I would never have done if it didn't get traction, right? So you're looking for evidence-based decision-making. You're looking for, increased investment only based on evidence. And there's been a ton of pivoting over the years, trying out different content, different approaches, different ways of working that didn't work. And I've left those behind. And so it's amazing how much, this book was written with a general audience in place, but if you're familiar with those ideas, the kind of one of the key elements in the book should be very, very familiar to you. The rest is about, the self-confidence and the entrepreneurialism needed to build this platform and put yourself out there as a recognized expert. There's a lot of conversation that says, you shouldn't do that. Only other people can call you a thought leader. Personal branding is arrogant, right? That type of thing. And I disagree. I think that if you have the experience, if you have the expertise, if you have the credentials, if you've done the work and you're engaging the community in a respectful, helpful way, there's nothing wrong with that. And building a personal brand around that. Many, many people have done it and it works.
I have a question. How do you do what it's called portfolio management? I mean, you're talking right now or on shifting your interest through to Agile HR. There is a ton of things you could do now and the time is limited. So if you have many possible branches you can follow from your current work or your current area of expertise or your current flag, how do you select things? Or are you running small experiments for many possible paths, or do you have that in your mind? Or because there's a ton of things, and how do not lose focus? How do not try 10 things at the same time?
Yeah, so I have a Kanban board and it has a whip limit of 3. Number one. So first of all, I use the tools. They work to run my life and my business. I do run experiments, right? So there's hypotheses and there are experiments. I'm looking over here, my whiteboard is over here, and there are hypotheses on the whiteboard, and I run experiments. Now I try to focus on, 1, 2, or 3 things at a time. And I give them some time. It's despite having done this kind of work for a long time, it's still difficult to let my ideas go, even when the evidence says they're not working. So things stay in the doing column probably a little bit longer than they should. But I run experiments, and the success criteria. So, and this is in the book, right? The measures of success are not, hey, Jeff, did you publish the article, or did you publish the book or give the talk? It's how many people read the article? How many people shared the article? How many inbound leads did the article generate? Or just inbound emails did the article generate? Did I get any hate mail about the article? Sometimes it happens. And so you're looking for that behavior change in your audience to tell you if what you're doing is resonating. And if it's not resonating, then eventually you have to let it go and move another hypothesis into the doing column. But yeah, that's it. It's a bunch of experiments and really trying to focus this work in progress, the focus on with using WIP limits.
I would like to add another question in case anybody else has. When it's time to really let things go, when it's time to stop exploiting whatever you are expert at.
When is it time?
To jump to another thing. You're expert in one thing. You're making money on it. You're very well known. When is the time to say, okay, fair enough. Let's move to another. Let's start investing on my new second hydrogen. Hydrogen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I'm not moving off. In my opinion, I'm expanding. Right. So if you look at the things that I've done so far, Lean UX was very, for designers by designers initially. Right. Sense and Respond was a business book for leaders and stakeholders. And then Forever Employable is kind of for everybody. The foundational principles underneath all three of those books are the same. They really are. Like if you read Lean UX, if you read Sense and Respond, if you read Forever Employable, the basis of those books is the same. It's about continuous learning, improvement, experimentation, customer centricity, audience centricity, whatever it is, right? And so, in my opinion, what I'm doing is I'm growing, and I'm growing the audience, I'm growing the opportunity. The interesting thing is that if you are successful at something, if you're lucky enough to really plant a flag and have that flag become associated with that, you become, the lean startup guy, the lean UX guy, whatever it is. It's a double-edged sword. I don't know if you have that expression in Spanish, but there's two sides to that. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing, right? You're the lean UX guy, right? And then also you're forever the lean UX guy. And so when you want to be something else, people say, well, you're the lean UX guy. You're not this new thing. And so you have to work really hard to expand the conversation. Sense and Respond was really difficult because, Josh and I are designers, and we wrote, Lean UX was a design book, and we wanted to write a business book. And everybody said, well, you're the lean UX guys. Why are you writing a business book? And so moving off of that was difficult. It took it took 2 years to build that conversation. And, the HR, I think there's opportunity in the HR space. And I think it's helpful to the companies that we're all trying to work with. And so I've been building up to that. So again, it takes time, and I don't think I've ever really given up the principles. And I see myself as expanding rather than saying goodbye. I still do lean UX work. You know that, right? I still do Sense and Respond work. And now it's super interesting, I have to tell you, to see what kind of work this brings in. Because it's going to be different than what I've been doing up until now. So.
Whoop.
It looks like there's a question in the chat, Alex.
Okay. Hi, Jeff, thanks. I am on almost my 50s, and I decided to reinvent myself, starting with Scrum and step by step into the Agile mindset. But I have doubts about which path to follow. What will you recommend?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a generic answer because I don't have all your specifics, but I'll tell you, and it's a kind of a restating of what we said before. Make hypotheses. So write hypotheses about what you think you should do and what kind of result you'll see if you're right. and then design experiments around that. You know, there's examples of that in the book about how to take the hypothesis idea and apply it. But for example, you know, you could have a hypothesis that says, look, you know, I believe that I should make 5-minute YouTube videos for aspiring plumbers, you know, or like fix it yourself, do it yourself, home repair people about plumbing in the house. And I'll know that it's working when I get 1,000 followers to my YouTube channel in the first year, right? Something like that. That's a hypothesis. And then you can run experiments. Now, the experiment isn't, I'm going to go buy a 10,000 euro studio for my home office and start making well-produced videos. The experiment is, I'm going to go buy a 10 euro tripod for my phone, put my phone on it, point it at my face, and maybe the sink that I'm repairing, and make my 5-minute YouTube video about plumbing, and then put it on YouTube, and then tell everybody and see what happens and what kind of feedback you get. And if that goes well, you make another one, and then you make another one. And then if it starts to go really well and you hit your 1,000 followers, maybe you buy a nicer camera or a nicer tripod, right? And that's the idea. The idea is to think about where you'd like to be, how you'd like to get there, and then how do you de-risk that, right? How do you reduce that risk? And you reduce that risk with experiments, lightweight experiments. That's what I would do.
I would like to say that there is a ton of advice in the book. It's not about that.
True. And yet the book is still very, very relatively short. You can read it in one sitting or 2 sittings. Absolutely.
More questions?
What else? No questions. How can that be?
I would like to do a quick experiment. How many of you, you know the reactions on Zoom, okay, on the lower pane? How many of you are freelancers? Please raise your thumbs up.
Mm-hmm.
And you can clap if you're working currently for an employer. You know where it is? In the bottom bar. I found very interesting the part of entrepreneurship, or at least to have this mindset in the company. I also think that some companies, the culture may not feel comfortable with having people which is not following the standard procedures, whatever. Do you want to mention anything about this part of being employable in a company?
Look, I think that this works for you if you're a freelancer or if you work in-house. I think that if you work inside a company, you have an opportunity to become a thought leader inside that company. And in fact, there are companies that already have jobs like this. Microsoft has had developer evangelists for years. They're thought that this is what they do. They go around and they talk about specific technology and ways of working. And so I think there's a real opportunity there to become a thought leader and to attract smart people to your company, number one. So it's great for the hiring brand of the company. Now, the other benefit is that you might start to attract new job opportunities for yourself. And that's good too. It's good to have options as well. And it's good to know that there's somebody or a few people in the office who are continuously giving back to the company, to the department, that type of thing. And so I think that there's a real benefit to it, but I can definitely see where some companies would be worried about this or not thrilled about you doing something like this, because you might get, you might start to become a bigger star than the company. I think still that's a good thing for the company, but not every company sees it that way. And if that's the case, you have to decide if that's where you still want to work or if you want to go somewhere else.
Okay, more questions? Else we can finish?
I would
No?
very much like it if you bought the book. I'm going to just go ahead and ask. I would be very happy. And if I will say this, if you do buy the book, I would be even happier if you wrote a review on Amazon for it. Even if you hate it, that's fine. I would just, reviews on Amazon are important to me. That's my metric. In case you're curious what my KR is in my OKR, one of them is Amazon reviews. So how many? Because think about it. If you write a book and people say nothing about it, nothing good, nothing bad, then that book was a dud, right? So I'm hoping that if I get enough reviews, it's an indication that, you know, people loved it, people hated it, but at least they had an opinion about it. That's what I care about.
I already did my review, but still being reviewed. Okay, so last chance? No? Okay, so thank you everybody for coming. Thank you a lot, Jeff, for sharing your story. And I hope we can meet you soon in this meetup or even better live in person.
I look forward to it, Alex. Thanks again for having me. See you.
Okay,
guys. Thanks.
take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.